chances are high that you know this lady. Lady Justice is the main image of justice we have. A blindfolded woman with scales and a sword. She is blindfolded because she has decided not to see whom she has in front of her. With her scales, she tries to measure pain, crime, and fit that to punishment. With her sword, she delivers her punishment, monopolizing its violence. Is this a just image? How can we think about justice through images? These are the questions I will ask here today. As a woman, the accessories of Lady Justice suffocate me. That might be because I'm not a lady. Maybe it's because I'm not dressed to kill. In my talk today, my companions will be women, real women. Let us consider for a moment the blindfold. If justice was really blind, as she claims to be, then my question is, why are prisons filled mostly with blacks, foreigners, and the poorest among us? I think she is blind in order not to see the injustices imposed in her name, not to see the pain and meaninglessness created by our ugly institutions, our prisons. Deep down, a woman, in fact, this lady cannot bear to see. When trying to do justice, when claiming to do justice, our eyes must be open wide. The men and women in our hands are not abstract, but real human beings. They have been babies with a crystal face, playful children, and have grown up men and women among us. They are called Emily, Antonio, Philip, Brunilda. In 1931, a woman called Margaret Wilson, on her own initiative, curiosity, and interest, and also concern, writes a book called The Crime of Punishment. She was not an expert. She is just a woman. She writes this about her book. She says, "This is a woman's book, and therefore we shall be as shamelessly women as we please. And that means we shall not consider the law or justice or safety or any other abstraction at a distance from the meaning they have on the lives of men and women, boys and girls we love." Lady Justice is especially proud of her scales. We are obsessed with the scales. But our obsession is presumptuous. A very simple tour of crime and punishment in time and space shows how ridiculous our assumptions are. The same crime today is not even taken very seriously. Yesterday, it was punished with death penalty. I'm talking about things like killing chicken, cutting trees, stealing horses, being a witch. Being a witch today is even fashionable. The same crime, such as drug use, in Norway is punished with a fine, in Singapore with death penalty. We try for accuracy and precision, but cannot find it. In fact, geometrical rigor and human activity do not go together well. The algebra of suffering, writes Anna Messuti in her book Time as Punishment, is minus times minus equals more. Negative times negative equals positive. But do we really believe that in order to get rid of suffering, we need to add additional suffering? The sword of justice delivers punishment, but does not keep a distance from it. For this reason, the history of punishment is not less cruel than the history of crime. So, is this a just image? How can we think about alternative ideas of justice through images? Since 10 years, I work on an alternative idea of justice called restorative justice, Restorative justice challenges Lady Justice in all its elements: blindfold, scales, and sword. Its eyes and ears are open wide to listen to and see the voices and faces of those that have been harmed and those that have harmed. It does not have the arrogance to think we can measure pain and equate it to punishment. It deals with the irreversibility of human action. What has been done cannot be undone. There is no equality of pain. Crime and punishment are not interchangeable. We must move on from this. Restorative justice tries to do rights from wrong. It keeps crime at a distance, says Claudia Mazzucato. It can meet violence, but does not replicate it, does not use it, and therefore does not legitimize it. Answering evil with evil might seem the most obvious, but it is not the best way to establish an equilibrium. Claudia Mazzucato is one of the mediators that has created very important encounters between perpetrators of political violence in 1970s in Italy and their victims. The best argument against violence, she argues, is a critique of violence. The sword of justice cuts between victims and offenders, innocent and guilty, partisans of one and the other, relevant from irrelevant fact. As a mediator, Mazzucato likens her work to another image, that of the plow. It is in the nature of the plow to work for many years. It is in the nature of the sword to work but 1 minute. It takes years and years to nourish and maintain human lives and human relations. But is the plow a good image of restorative justice? Claudia Mazzucato herself finds anchorage in another image. This is a logo of the Constitutional Court in South Africa. It was made by a woman artist called Caroline Parton. In this image, you see people sheltered under the branches of a tree to symbolize a justice that protects. It is based on traditional African communities where people were literally sitting under a tree to discuss their disputes and conflicts through dialogue. The image also tries to represent another concept, the concept of Ubuntu. This concept refers to humanity, but humanity made possible only through the existence of other people. In fact, in the images, you will notice that dark and light are distinct. The branches and the people, in a way, are distinct, black and white. But on another level, you will see that they are not distinct. You do not see where does one start and where does the other end. In my work in restorative justice, I have been very inspired by scholars like Claudia Mazzucato, but also others who feel the need to step outside their narrow field. These scholars find anchorage in arts and literature. I think in our field we need contamination, we need to step outside, otherwise we remain a closed system. This image was made by a street artist here in Leuven, and it refers very clearly to what I think a closed system is. Listening to oneself only, speaking to oneself only. If we ignore arts and imagination, we lack the tools that will give us the necessary inspiration to understand what do we do, why do we do it, and how can we imagine things being otherwise. But our brains are not instruments of representation, they are instruments of action. This is the reason why I'm very conscious of the importance of action, and therefore I do like art that acts, that moves, that touches, that represents and shows another image of what is possible. I want to talk to you about another woman, the Sardinian artist Maria Lai. She died 4 years ago at 93 years old. I was very lucky to meet her 2 years before she died in her atelier in Sardinia. In 1981, Maria Leid made a truly unique piece of art in her hometown in Ulasai. For her artwork, she started talking to the people in town, listening to their stories. Among all the stories told, one story caught her imagination: the legend of the blue ribbon. The legend told of a little girl who was in a cave with two older men, and the cave falls down. The girl holds on to a blue ribbon she sees in the sky and gets saved. The men do not believe her and die under the cave. Now the legend is built on a real event that took place in Ulasai, when the mountain that stands on top of the town fell down and caused a tragedy. It was this legend and the imagination of the little girl that gave the artist the right tools to start her project. Merchants from all over Italy donated meters and meters of blue fabric. She asked the inhabitants to cut long blue ribbons out of the fabric. Of course, some just watched, because some people were very hesitant to participate, but most people did, especially children did. Once the blue ribbons were ready, she asked the inhabitants to tie the town into itself, tie every house to each other. As people started to do this, a problem emerged. People were telling her they did not want to tie the house to the house of the neighbor because they were enemies. The artist worked with this resistance and asked people to tie the houses anyhow, but when there was friendship, and to tie loaves of bread into the nodes, or put colorful clothes to symbolize it, also reminding us that friendship is rare. And she told them to put nothing where there was no friendship. Now, as the houses were being tied into each other, a helicopter flew in and tied the whole town to its mountain in order to make peace with it. Now, I know this image belongs to an art museum and not to a courthouse. I also know that it's very impractical to tie our courthouses with blue ribbons. But I want this image to make us think. Think of what a justice that restores and repairs would look like. I think time has come for Lady Justice to grow up and become a woman, a 93-year-old woman. Is this, how can we think about just images? Probably we have to think a little bit further about that, but let me leave you with one thing tonight. When you go home, tonight, tomorrow, please look and think about images of justice. When you go into a courthouse, bow in respect in front of the statue of Lady Justice, but look further for alternatives. I hope our courthouses and our municipalities will launch public forums inviting artists, students, and others to work together and imagine a justice otherwise. And if it can be imagined, it can be done. Thank you.